Well, welcome back to the Tuxes and Tomahawks podcast. I'm Adam Dorito, and it is an absolute pleasure to bring on Jeremy Goodall. He's running for state chairman for the Colorado Republican National Party, and it's super important. And as promised, I offered anyone who wanted to run for state chair to come on my podcast, open invite to anyone at the Colorado Hispanic Republicans Forum, and whatever candidate reaches out to me before the 25th, which is tomorrow, we'll get their video posted at 1 a.m. So, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, look, Jeremy, not everyone's going to get to meet you around the state. You know, it's a pretty big state here in Colorado. So, who are you? Where did you come from? And what made you think that it was a good idea to get involved in Republican conservative politics here in the state of Colorado?
So, my name is, of course, Jeremy Goodall. I am a bonus member, precinct leader. I've been on the El Paso County Executive Committee. I've actually been elected to the state executive committee, and I was the CD5 chair. I've been involved in Colorado politics since 2006. Really, that was when I first became a precinct leader. I've been around. I remember the 9/12s, the Tea Party. I was front and center for the whole Tancredo, Dan Mays unpleasantness. I've been front row for pretty much all of the recent El Paso County unpleasantness, and every major controversy. I know where the bodies are. I know where the trails have led. I know what's caused it. I know where it's going, and I feel like we need somebody that has that level of insight and institutional knowledge to actually be able to reach in and mend the fences and mend the bridges and rebuild communications channels and actually get this party to a point where it can have the important internal conversations that are necessary to provide leadership.
You know, I would agree. Like, I've worked in federal politics for about 15 years, mostly on military reform things. I went to the Air Force Academy, had a lot of issues going on there. And even dealing with like Doug Lamborn, Ken Buck in the past, like just absolutely useless representatives that don't really care about their constituents. And every guy that runs or every woman that runs, oh, I'm gonna hear about the veterans. Yeah, except when we come to you with issues, you don't actually want to do anything about it because it's a giant money laundering scheme, in my opinion. So, I'm trying to pass a bill called the Dorito Act on the federal side. I've been doing that for a few years now, which is pretty much about falsifying mental health records for reporting rape and sexual assault. Can't get anyone to bite on it because everyone's self-interested. So people are telling me, oh, you should get involved in local politics. It'd be really fun for you. Like, you're really good at this. And then I get involved in local politics, and it's like it's a dumpster fire. And that's an understatement. Like, it's worse than DC by far. And I started understanding who these people's names were. Like, I reached out to like the Colorado GOP and just sent an email saying, hey, I'd like to join your luncheon and see what's going on. I meet some of the state officers, no idea who these people are. And I start learning about the intricacies of like Weld County and El Paso County. And specifically, you talked about El Paso County because that's where you're from. That's what you've dealt with. You know where all the bodies are buried, which is super important because the corruption that's going on in CD3 right now, which is the largest congressional district in the state of Colorado, is super important. And, before we get to those specifics, why do you want to run for state chair and what makes you the best candidate?
So my background is that I am not a politician. I've worked with candidates. I've done a lot of grassroots organization. I've been involved in the party from the very basic levels up into like senior campaign consultant strategy. I've done the fundraising. I know the whole animal, and I also bring a temperament of conciliation. I can find conversation and points of agreement to then work towards getting stuff done. That I think a lot of folks they just they look first for what they don't agree on
Mhm.
to try and create problems or to figure out, like, because they're trying to figure out who they want to support. Well, I'm looking at this from a more of like a top down organizational model, or rather a bottom up organizational model, and get the whole view, because it's, as the chairman, your job is the totality, not the individual races, not the individual districts. How do we get a restoration of health within the interpersonal relationships? How do we get people to just stop yelling anytime someone asks them a question, which I observed in the meeting at CD4 the other night. CD3 apparently was also quite contentious, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think that is going to be something that can be imposed. That has to be something that is driven by example. And
I would agree. I
I've
would agree with that,
always,
Jeremy. Yeah, I would agree with that. So this one thing you're bringing is a little bit of voice of reason, and not to be biased or anything, but like I said, I go to some of these meetings and I sit there, and it's just 20 people, the same cabal, yelling at each other. Nothing gets done. They try to prevent members from voting. People walk in with pre-printed out lists of this is who you're going to vote for. This is how it's going to be done. They're
they
not
start
giving
handing that out.
yeah, it's ridiculous. It's like, wait, if I want to run and I want to be a new person involved in the party, I should be given an equal chance. But like what they're doing is they've already picked their winners. They stage the voting structure. They don't allow new people to come in. It's the same people over and over again that are controlling these local politics. But they claim, at least what I've heard from people like Britta Horn or Rich Holtorf, who are also running, and they were offered an interview as well. They never reached out to me. But, I watched their 9 news interviews. I watch everything else. Well, we want to expand the party. We need to bring over more independents. We need to do all these things. But then I sit there and go, well, I literally watched you at a meeting prevent like 100 and something other people from voting. You claim that you're trying to bring in more people, but you want to keep it controlled to make sure that your narratives and that your initiatives are only passed and everyone else is shut out. So that makes no sense. And I think, this
Well,
this brings a good issue because your pin says like the opt-out stuff, right? So people
yeah.
claim they want to expand the party, they want to bring in independents, and they want to blah, 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 and they want to get more Republicans and blah, blah, blah involved, but then they shut everybody out. What is the opt-out? What is the primary vote? And explain that process to people who don't understand and what your opinion is. Should we have an open primary? Should we
Okay.
have a
So
closed primary?
the primary. Well, so what's happened in Colorado is that the Colorado Republican Party is effectively a captured organization. The groups like Ken Theory's, I forget his voter. He just ran the ranked choice voting. Prior
Yep.
to that, he ran the open primary statute initiative.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so the initiative that they ran, that was implemented, and that changed the rules under which primaries are performed by the state. They did this. They basically ran this same legislation in California, and they kicked off that, and the jungle primary in California and the open primaries there are also from Kent Theory. They went and proved it out there. They hit a major hiccup though in California because they were sued, and it was actually taken to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the open primary, when imposed on a private political party, was ruled unconstitutional because as a political party, we have a right to freedom of association. That's a
Right.
First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
What happened is Kent Theory and his guys said, oh, well, then what we need to do is put in language that does allow a political party to opt out.
Right.
And therefore, in lawyer brain thinking, because the opt-out is available, even though they set the threshold for it at 75%, which is an astronomically high voter threshold.
Right, it is.
The default is that you are in the open primary. So you have to take action to get out of the open primary, but if you do nothing, you settle down into it, and you just sit there, and they get to basically control you until you climb out of that hole. They did that so that it would pass the constitutional test by the skin of its teeth. We have been belaboring under that and been having to try and climb out ever since they put that on top of us. And the last time we voted on it, the Central Committee was, I believe, 63, 64% voting to opt out. There's a very vocal and obstinate chunk that is a minority view within the party that wants to maintain the status quo. That's because the status quo got them their position and got them their little accolades, and their little chairmanship, or even their elected political office. There's a group that is actually trying to do they're doing the lawsuit. That's the other option that they're fighting for. That lawsuit was brought to bear 4 years ago. I actually voted in support of it. I said, yeah, because my opinion is whatever gets us out of this stupid trap.
Yeah.
And so the 4 years ago, we voted for the lawsuit. 2 years ago, we actually voted again to say, yeah, we are in support of this lawsuit continuing. Please, keep fighting. I have not heard any developments. I haven't seen any developments. I've heard nothing in 4 years. I've heard a lot of, well, now we're moving to this one, and then we've appealed this decision, and we've done that, but nothing's actually occurred. And as long as you're under a Democrat-dominated court system, I'm not hopeful that anything will happen.
Right.
And so the way I've been explaining it is, under the current status quo, we have non-Republicans voting. We have non-Republican Democrat money in some cases getting pumped into our primaries.
Yes.
And we have a Democrat Secretary of State overseeing, handling our ballots, and telling us what the counts are.
Totally legit.
By what, that's 3 strikes you're out. By what rational thought process are candidates that go through that process Republican?
Exactly. I mean, and if you look at the Liberty scorecard for a lot of these representatives all around the state, they're not voting for conservative values. They're just voting to stay in office and appease to their constituents and their donors. And I'm against that. Like, I'm a guy that, I'm part of the generation.
That's the real thing is that they're like, whoever gets you into office is generally who you will view yourself as accountable to. And the people getting these guys into office are not Republican voters.
Correct. I would agree with that.
It's these outside donor groups. It's these, like all that stuff. And that's a major problem, which I think actually translates directly into the identity crisis that we've kind of been going through as a party for the last 2 decades. And that is that we throw around these terms like rhino, or I guess the other side calls other folks Davidians, because we're not grassroots or something. Right. Yeah, grassroots. Well, I want to make it so that we all can agree on what a Republican is, so that we can then all work together as Republicans to then get Republican values. Now, the values I'm going to be supporting on that are pretty clear. If you've spent any time talking to me, I am 100% on the Constitution. I am, pro Second Amendment. I'm not just pro-life. I'm actually adopted. My birth date is after Roe v. Wade. I actually met my birth mother a couple of years back. Mm-hmm. I'm that's these social issues. I'm also a founding board member on Protect Kids Colorado. So the woke agenda and stuff like that. Like, in my opinion, that's what we're fighting, because we're standing for upright moral citizens and moral power. And bringing Colorado back to being a state worth living in.
So this is actually an interesting point for you then, Jeremy. So so you bring like these, I'm pro Second Amendment, I'm pro life, I'm pro Constitution. I think that's something all Republicans can agree. And there was something like people are like, well, are you for doing a loyalty test, like a written loyalty page? Like, is that required? And I remember bringing this up to somebody who was running for Weld County Commissioner up here like a year ago. And I sat there and went, well, will you sign, something to the state party, or to the National Republican, National Committee that states you're pro-life? And they literally told me as a Republican candidate, no, I can't sign that because it'll make me lose votes here in this county. Like, if you can't stand on the basic principles of the RNC, maybe you're in the wrong party. Register as independent. It's America. You can believe what you want, but like, you're running as a Republican, you're stating you hold Republican values, but you won't stand by the basic Republican values that the party is founded on. What? That doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't make any sense to me either. And it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. And that's, I think, why we've seen people step away from the Republican Party, because, frankly, we've become a convenient political label that can be purchased for a six-figure check.
That's a really good one-liner. Somebody tagged that out. That was a good one-liner. So like, it sounds like in a way you might be for, not necessarily loyalty pledges, but like vetting candidates, right? I think it's important to vet our candidates in a way, right? And this is another thing too. I'd ask your opinion.
It's not just the candidates. Mm-hmm. The donors, like there's significant money coming into Republican primaries. And I know this because it happened in House District 18 back in 2022. The grassroots candidate, the lovely gal, my stepdaughter. So I knew this very, very closely. Her total campaign raise for the primary was about $5,000. Her opponent, who did go through the nomination assembly, like she did not petition her way onto the ballot, but she went through the assembly, made it onto the ballot through the assembly by I think like 4 votes. Mm-hmm. Like that's how close it was to like keeping her off entirely. And the shenanigans that they went through to make sure that she got those 4 votes was pretty eye-opening. In the primary, these kind of unaffiliated groups came in and dropped $100,000 to $150,000 in mailers and media buys in support of this lawyer.
Right.
Well, you think, oh, okay, wow, they're really invested. Okay, that's great. Like that's a candidate who can raise money. Except that in the general, that same group turned around and didn't give any money to her, but gave it to, but actually through other groups, like transferred the money around, and it came into the Democrat side of things.
Interesting.
So they're using their funding to basically cherry pick their preferred opponents. And let me tell you, if you're trying to play football and the other team's coach gets to choose your players and lineup, like what chance do you have?
You don't have one. This is what drives me nuts and I think this is what is happening in like districts like CD3 or CD4, right? Is that you have these cherry picked people that either have a lot of donor backing. You're not allowing normal Americans to run for office in a fair race, so to speak. They're getting cherry picked. It's causing massive corruption in the reorganization meetings, and I'm sure we'll get to talk about that later. So, like I said, it sounds like you're for like we should vet our candidates. We should have some kind of like litmus loyalty test or something. If you're going to run for office, we're going to give you money from the state party. Like if we're going to give you $5,000, at least say you're pro-life and you're pro-gun. Like, can you do that? Is it that hard?
Say that
yeah, and willing to say that in public, right? So another
that's what you are supposed to stand for.
You would think so. So the next question I have for you now that we're talking about this is, a lot of people say that the state party should not, endorse candidates during the primary, that we should let it open and let everyone run for free. That's fine. My personal opinion on this is that, yeah, we let everybody and their mother run for these positions in the primary. They're unvetted. And then whoever, is going to get the most money or endorsement from backing is going to win. But like, those are the people that won't sign the loyalty pledges that are going to override some other more effective Republican candidates. So do you think the state party should endorse candidates in the primary, or do you think they should stay neutral and stay out of it?
So in my opinion, anybody that's conducting an election should be obligated to neutrality. Like you have to run a fair election. As the chairman of CD5, I ran a fair election. Like there was a tremendous amount of consternation. We had the votes. We actually had paper ballots same day, hand counted. It was all done.
The way it should be.
It was all done out in the open, like where everybody got to watch the sausage get made. We didn't put it behind closed doors because, people are like, oh, we don't want anybody to know that there could be problems or that people are going to be, it's a human process. No, bring it out in the open. Transparency, physical transparency.
What a concept.
The bins we used were also clear so that you can see that the boxes are empty.
Right.
Like that's huge. And for some reason, like CD4 was using these big metal boxes, and I'm like, why are you doing that?
Oh my God.
Like no one can see. No one, this is not great.
Well, if you win, you're getting a controversy filed.
Yeah. Well, anyway, where was I at? Okay, yeah. So so all of this stuff is going on. But my view is that if you're running the election, yes, you must be neutral. But obligating to pre-primary neutrality under the current system is kind of stupid because we're not running it.
Right.
We're not overseeing it. We're not handling it. We've given you guys the assembly, and so I would say maybe pre-assembly neutrality is definitely appropriate. But carrying that through the primary is like the folks that are chairmen, the folks that are vice chairs, secretaries, the officers. These are folks that have been involved in the party, know the players, have long histories and really in-depth knowledge of the implications and the different issues, and have seen a lot of candidates. So they've got a pretty good judge of character, and you're going to tell them that they have to be quiet. You're going to handcuff them, make them sit on their hands. Well, who does that leave to tell the voters what the good Republicans are? It leaves only one group, and that's the donors. And let me tell you, the only vetting the donors receive is, does the check clear?
Yeah, you're right.
We've been abdicating our actual responsibility to vet these candidates and to give an opinion as Republicans. I don't think that pre-primary neutrality as a blanket policy is either wise or well advised. It's just more of the same, and we've clearly seen where the status quo has taken us, which is to the ragged knife's edge of irrelevance as a party in Colorado.
I agree. So I want to bring up this picture. I find it really interesting. So, everyone wants to talk about bringing in more Republicans, getting more Republican voters involved in the system. We need to so-called, bring in the independents, make them switch their voter registration, whatever. Yeah. This is Weld County yesterday or 2 days ago. AOC and Bernie Sanders show up. They got 11,000 people outside. They got 10,000 on the inside. And we can't get 50 freaking people to show up to a pancake breakfast at 6:30 a.m. on a Wednesday. That's my inside joke for the old people that run this entire party and ruin everything in my life and send me to war for 20 years, but that's another story. But we should keep doing what they want to do so we can send my future kids to freaking war too, right? But this is a problem. I mean, they showed up to Greeley. We got more people showing up in Greeley than any other event. What do you want to do as state chairman I hate to use the words unity because I think unity is bullshit. I think it's either you're going to abide by the principles or you're not. And if you're going to play by the rules and do what we need to do, great. But if you're going to be a distraction and cause all these problems, you're just causing more division, and we have these rhinos and grassroots BS arguments. So what do you want to do as a state chairman if you get elected to make sure that we have these type of turnouts and that we can bring faith back to our party, that people actually want to participate from all age groups around?
Well, I think the first thing is to make ourselves. Well, I think the first thing is, of course, everyone wants to make America great again. But I think the first and primary role that we tasked to achieve that is that we first have to make the Colorado Republican Party Republican again.
Yes, thank you.
That's job one, and the way we do that is opt out.
So explain your platform with that. You're
under Democrat control of our candidate selection process. We have to have the conversations of who we are as a party, and we have to have that conversation with ourselves and each other so we can come to a basic understanding and agreement. There's no other way to do it.
No, so we talked about what the opt-out is, where it came from, Ken Theory, California it is. Why do you think the opt-out is so important for the Republican Party moving forward under your leadership, and what is it going to do for you to strengthen the Republican Party in Colorado?
So what we have right now is different silos of candidates all over the state, and they're all basically tapped in. Like you mentioned, like Barb Kirkmeyer is tapped into oil and gas. She's taking money there. You got agribusiness. You've got all this stuff. And so these money groups are basically picking and choosing candidates, and they're finding people that like your background is actually in alignment with our stuff. And so we actually end up with all of these candidates who are taking money to basically become relevant in the primary and hopefully win and get their office and get to be important. And what happens is, because all of the different money groups are different and have different desires and different goals, all of our candidates are each individually pursuing what their donors have directed them to do, because they're not accountable to any centralizing, cohesive, emerging consensus. Mm-hmm. There isn't any method, or there isn't any model that allows that to kind of emerge out. And so, in my opinion, if we pursue the opt-out, there's one major difference between the opt-out and the lawsuit. And that is that the opt-out version puts us under our own internal bylaws. And our bylaws do not have any method or support for a petition process. Mm-hmm. There isn't any rules like on how those petitions would have to be done, whether it be collected, how they would be, vetted, any of that stuff. And so you would have, there are rules that I think do enforce a primary through the nomination and assembly process, but there is no guarantee. Unless we change the bylaws and implement a petition process, which that I would actually be very much against, because the petition process has been weaponized to allow the money to corrupt our candidates.
Isn't that how Jeff Hurd got elected?
Well, Jeff Hurd, the petition process, and the last time I actually got the data and looked it up for 2022, there was something like 38 candidates statewide that petitioned onto the ballot, and that's at state level races. So I don't think that counts county commissioners or any of the lower kind of county stuff.
Right.
We're just talking House district, Senate district, and I don't think the governor's race and stuff like that wasn't in 20, or maybe that was. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it was all the governors and all that, all the statewide offices. 38 candidates. 5 were Democrat Party candidates. And of that 5, only 2 actually bothered to turn in their petitions. Everyone else on the Democrat side went through their assembly. They went through and they were accountable to their core party leadership and their core, their rank and file and delegates and all of that. On the Republican side, the rest of those candidates, so there were more than a handful that didn't actually qualify, but I believe it was 25, 27 Republican candidates petitioned on.
Right.
Circumventing any accountability to the party. Well, how many candidates do we have in office? Not, it ain't double 27, I'll tell you that. Like, I mean, we got what, 19, I think we just moved up to 21 state reps, and then a handful of senators. Like that's terrifying, because these guys are basically, by petitioning on, they're beholden to the money, because the money is what got them into the primary. The money is what got them through the primary, and the money is what got them into the general. So why would they care, and why would they be responsive to the issues and viewpoints of us as rank and file Republicans?
No, I agree. You bring up some good points. So like the problem is these individual candidates are being corrupted by outside donors, because the Republican Party in general is not getting enough money to vet and support its own candidates internally, right? So that's actually a next good question for that is, if you get elected as state chair, what are you going to do to bring back donors to the Republican Party so that way you can control the money and make sure that candidates are getting the right funding they need for their campaigns, and that way candidates are not being influenced by outside special interest groups?
So here's my background with money. My educational background is economics with a specialty in global economic policy. I've done a lot of business. I've done fundraising. I've done investments. I've done all kinds of stuff. And I've been in front of venture capital firms that can write you checks for, $15, $20 million. I've been in front of smaller groups. I've been in front of all of these different levels of investors all over the place. And I can tell you, the one thing that closes wallets faster than anything is doubt. As soon as they doubt that you are going to use their investment to actually achieve your stated goal, then why would they write the check? The checkbook goes flip, close, done. As chairman, my job is to facilitate the conversations that will bring about the confidence in a party that knows who it is. And then if we can know who we are, then they know what they're buying. Well, not buying, but they know what they're investing in. Because otherwise they're just throwing money at people for, because, oh, you guys are nice guys. Nobody invests because you're a nice guy. People invest because they want to see your vision come to fruition, because they know it will benefit them. And there are so many of these very I've had numerous conversations with extremely high net worth individuals. They're looking at Colorado, where they live, where their grandkids live, and they're looking at it and going, they're watching what's going on in our schools with the woke agenda and the trannies and the transgender and the whole ugliness of that. And they're looking at that and going, they're coming for my grandkids. They're not just my kids are all grown. They're not coming for my kids. They're coming for my grandkids. How do we stop this? And I worked with Protect Kids Colorado. We ran an initiative group. We actually ran two initiatives. Unfortunately, we ended up coming up a bit short. Going through the title board, they tied themselves in absolute knots to eat up as much time as they possibly could. And so instead of the full 6 months we are statutorily granted, we only had 3. And in that 3 months, we collected more than half of the signatures that were necessary, significantly more than half. And we did that by standing up a broad volunteer group, by bringing messaging. You want to talk about non-traditional Republican voters? We had, we had the Catholic Church, we had evangelical churches, but we also had sports teams, sports groups, Gays Against Groomers. We ran the political gamut of people that were on board and supporting and sending their volunteers. And this is something that 80% of the population got behind. Yeah. Now the problem is, in 3 months, we got more than half. And having done a lot of petition work, having cut my teeth on that, I can tell you that you don't have a linear progression of your signature collection. There's a lag time, and as you get it out there, it kind of goes, and it's almost an exponential curve. And so by the end, you're getting people that have heard it multiple times and have said, "Oh, I need to sign that." They've missed you a couple of times, but now they've already committed and they're making it, and then they bring other friends. It's great. But if we had probably another month, another 35 days, 40 days, I'm very confident we would have actually made it and done so, not on half of the budget that we were originally planning, but rather 10% of the budget that we adjusted to from what we were originally promised by some of the guys that stepped into it and helped us get the whole organization off the ground. Right. So there is and I'll tell another little story. When I grew up, my dad my dad was pastoring a church in the Pacific Northwest. And when we took that church, the first board meeting, this board set him down and said, well, Pastor Goodall, we told you there were some issues. Well, the major problem is that we have a financial problem. Like we're coming up short. Things are the bill's coming due, but we've got a financial problem this big. And then the next month they had their board meeting. They said, hey, remember when we said it was this big? Actually, it's this big. And then the third month they said, remember this big? Yeah, it's actually this big. And this kind of became the pattern for about 4 or 5 months. And about 6 months in, as we're looking and kind of getting as he was getting a full realization of the magnitude of the problem, the major employer for that particular congregation was Boeing. 30% of the tithing congregation worked directly for Boeing. 40% of the remaining worked for contractors to Boeing. And 6 months in to him taking the church, Boeing went on strike for the first time in like a century. And I'm sorry, that's my phone. So Boeing went on strike for the first time in a century. And my dad basically like went into his office, sent all of the staff home because he was like, I don't even think I can make payroll by the end of this week. I don't know what we're going to do. And he went into his office and he sought the face of God. Like you do. And he was in his office praying, and he heard an audible voice in his office, and it said, Wade, what are you doing? And he popped up, looked around because he was like, somebody's messing with me. Actually went out and walked through the office, and he went looking through, and as he convinced himself that the building was actually empty, he went back into his office and he sat down and he said, okay. He was like, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing. And that's when he felt the Lord say to him, Wade, you don't have a money problem. You have a people problem.
Yeah.
You love the people and minister to the people, and I will bring the money. And 18 months later, so it was about 3 months later that Boeing actually came off of strike. They settled the strike. The congregation remembered that they had not been tithing and actually like wrote checks and made up the difference. New people arrived. People came in. There was health and growth. And 18 months later, we actually were in the process of like paying off that building. Like had moved that from being completely underwater to actually, we were basically like 18 months later, we were on a payment plan scheduled to basically have that building paid off in 3 years. Like they have the whole campus paid off. And that was when I learned that when people say like, oh, there's no fundraising, there's no money involved. Well, that's not because we have a money problem. That's because you have a fundamental people problem. People
Absolutely.
have lost trust. They've lost faith. And when you can rebuild the health and rebuild the relationships and restore that faith and remove the doubt of what's going to happen with their investment of not just money, but time, energy, and vision, people will open them up. People they want to grow. They want to be a part of these types of things. Nobody wants to sit down and just basically watch Colorado go down the drain.
No, and I think that's what's been happening very recently is that, like you said, the donors get really closed off because they see so much doubt. So that's kind of goes to my next question. What vision do you want to bring as the state chairman? What are your top 3 priorities as being the biggest leader of the Republican Party here in the state of Colorado if you get elected?
Well, first off is the opt-out. We got to opt out of Democrat control. Now, that's going to require us to then have very tough conversations. And that's going to require debate within us, and we're going to have to come together. So I believe my first priority is the opt-out. But then to implement that and actually bring things about, we need to institute health. We have to basically get rid of these kind of toxic communication strategies that have really been all over the place. We need to call that out. We need to hold each other accountable, and we have to, lead. And I would probably say I need to lead by example on that. when I say that there's been toxic and, like accusations stuff, like, there may be one finger pointing at you guys, but there's three pointing back at me. Here in El Paso County, I have not always been as friendly or because we've been in knockdown dragouts. And when I say that we need to find conciliation, like in El Paso County, things got ugly. I mean, really ugly. There were like false criminal charges filed. Women have been assaulted in meetings for the crime of being new. Like you showed up at Weld County and they wouldn't let you get elected. Well, we had new volunteers show up to help run organizational meetings, and previous members like wigged out to the point where they physically assaulted a pastor's wife. And this is not hyperbole. He was actually criminally convicted of that. That's how ugly it's been.
So what are you going to do to get rid of these people? Because it sounds like I'm not to cut you off on your first point here, but like you can't get anything done as a state chairman with these types of people being involved in the party and then disenfranchising people who want to show up and participate. Like, I know we talk about conciliation and opening it up and everything else, but like there are a certain group of people who are going to work against you no matter what you do. They're going to file lawsuits. They're going to waste your money. They're going to waste your time. They're going to assault more people. They're going to file more lawsuits. I see that with any candidate, honestly, at any point. Like, what are you going to do about that? Like, what are you going to do about that?
Well, my viewpoint is I am a Christian. As I mentioned, a pastor's kid. I've been raised in that, and I believe Matthew 18 is the process. First, you talk to people privately. Like when they're offending, you talk to them privately. If they refuse to stop being a jerk, you go to them with a couple of witnesses and say, "Hey, knock it off." And then you go to the third process. If they continue if they persist, you bring them in front of the body, which is executive committee, and it's an internal thing, but you're bringing it to a larger body. Now, in the biblical model, private, couple of witnesses, the body. If they still don't correct, you are to cast them out and have nothing further to do with them. And at that point, you pursue legal stuff. Like the lawsuits, the criminal complaints, like that becomes the appropriate course at that action or course of action at that point. But you have to, I think, exhaust the personal remedies first. And I will say,
at least you want to do that, though. At least you want to do that, Jeremy.
Yeah,
because like they're not doing that, right? I mean, I actually really like your model of what you're talking about that, but like we have so many distractors in the party now that they're filing lawsuits. I mean, heck, I showed up to one meeting and Todd Watkins had me approached by 2 sheriff's deputies because I was in the parking lot and just wanted to go to the meeting. Like I was deemed as a threat because I showed up to a meeting because I just wanted to see what was going on as a guy who just was participating. I'm just a constituent, man. You know what I mean? Like I just want to see what's going on. Right. So I think that's a good model. And you're expecting accountability within the party and just not letting it slide constantly. Because if you constantly let these people slide every single time, they just come back with more of their cronies, more in full force, and they keep distracting the meetings and nothing gets done ever. I mean, look at that other reorganization meeting.
Well, it's funny you bring up Todd Watkins. In El Paso County, I helped get him elected vice chair. He hadn't gone crazy yet. We just he was a former law enforcement officer. He presented well and he talked a good constitutional game.
Sure.
However, as soon as he was given any type of kickback on that's we're not in alignment on that. He's basically told the county party, you're wrong, I'm right, and I'm going to do what I want to do. Well, as the vice chair, he has only 2 duties that he's actually authorized and permitted under the bylaws to perform. One is to take over the meeting in the absence of the chair.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the absence of the chair could be, they just couldn't make it to the meeting, or they, had a car accident and they're no longer living, and we're without a chair. Like that's the job of the vice chair. The second duty, as articulated in the bylaws, is any other duties assigned by the chair.
Mm-hmm.
So anything he did beyond that is frankly outside of the mandate of that office. And he refused to be constrained by bylaws. He did not exhibit self-restraint. So the day of the Broomfield meeting, or foam meeting, or however you want to call it, that travesty, he was up there to call that to order because he was the one who pushed paperwork and was claiming, that he was, that he was owed a meeting. I strongly disagree, and as it turns out, the courts strongly disagree with his contention.
They did.
Yep. While he was up there in Broomfield, we were down here in El Paso County, and we held a meeting, to a disciplinary meeting, followed protocol, put forward all the stuff, gave notice, and had close to 400 county central committee members show up to voice their opinion, and half of them voted to throw him out. The threshold was 66%, but half of them voted to throw him out that day. Having talked with the half that didn't vote to throw him out, most of them basically said, "Look, we don't want to deal with it. He's going to be gone in March. Just how much damage could he really do?" Well,
he did a lot of damage. He cost the party a lot of money, and that's my biggest thing, right? Is that I don't care if you didn't like Dave Williams, I don't care. If you don't like Todd Watkins, I don't care. What I care about is that the most amount of PCPs and district captains, whatever else, can vote in the amount of people at their next organizational meeting, and the maximum amount of participation should be allowed in order to assure that the most people represented. And then what I see is that they try to divide the party.
That's actually in the Colorado statute. If you go in and you read Colorado statutes like 101 or 102, which lead into all of the statutes that now force, because you'll read stuff in the bylaws and you'll be like, where is this coming from? Why would we want to do this? Well, it's because it's language in the state statutes governing the protocol and behavior of the political parties.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff always it's amazing how it goes up and down and trickles around and.
Yeah, but it's like if you want to vote these people out, either hold a special meeting as indicated, which you need to, but it shouldn't be in the middle of the biggest contentious election in the United States with President Trump. You have a date in March where we can do the vote, so who cares? Wait for your time if you want to vote. And hey, we're doing it this week. We're going to do the same vote that everyone spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in wasted lawsuits waiting for, and here we are anyway. Right. So in my opinion is that the most amount of people should be participating. You shouldn't try to disrupt party leadership and try to, impeach people basically as they did with Trump in the middle of, a massive election season. So your priority number one is the opt out. So what is your second and third focuses as state chairman if you get elected?
So second focus is going to be returning interpersonal health, communication health. We've got cross channels. Everybody's there's like I was talking with I've been talking with a lot of county chairs as I threw my name into the ring here, and a lot of them are like, yeah, we don't really know what the state's doing, and I'm like, that's why is that? And they're like, well, they're sending an email here, or they're sending one here. Okay, 15 years ago, 2011, close to 15 years ago, I actually ran for state party secretary.
Mm-hmm.
I basically traveled the state. I actually met a lot of people. I got to really kind of know Colorado as a cohesive and whole entity. And one of the big problems at that time was that these county chairs would not even give their email address as a point of contact to the state party.
Why?
They were literally why? Because that's my email address and that's private information, and I don't want. And I was like, okay,
you're an elected voting member. You have to be somewhat of a public person. You dolt.
Well, not just that. I was looking at the state guys running the thing, and I was like, and we had to go to all these different events, and they were all talking, and I was like, you guys realize it's that's a 10-second fix, and they're like, what do you mean? I was like, well, you could just have a list, and you could just put Pitkin County at Colorado GOP, create your own email account for them, and then forward that to their private email. And then when they get elected to something else, or they're like they withdraw, or or not reelected as county chair, and their private email address is no longer the chairman's email address. Well, you're not having to change out from a customer facing portion. Just on the back end, you just repoint where that remails to. Like, that's a 10-second fix, guys. You don't have to wait for them to give you their personal email and permission to post it publicly on the state site.
Right.
Like, you can, and given what they've said, that probably makes more sense to them. But you have to think about things from the other guy's perspective, and then look for where you guys agree, and then implement solutions where there's agreement.
Yeah.
But this is all kind of just basic human management skills.
Another suggestion I had too, obviously I do podcasting, I do social media. I'm a civil affairs, psychological operations, intelligence officer by trade. This is what I do.
Yeah.
We need to get off this BS, really bad Facebook model where it's just a bunch of old people yelling into a void. It doesn't work, and it's not good for communication. One thing I would like to see from the state chair is like a modern social media strategy where you're being extremely transparent with what you're doing, whether that's Instagram, Twitter, Rumble, like every other state party that people take seriously has these assets, and they have like one social media manager or something like that, and that's what they're doing. Would you agree with something like modernizing our communication strategy, making things, because we have a massive state. Like, you're not going to Grand Junction every weekend to communicate with these people. You're not going to Weld County. You don't have time, right? So the best way you could do it is podcasting, live interviews, Twitter, constantly communicating with the members versus like 3 controlled groups by 2 admins that happen to be in your district that kick people out and block people from groups. Another thing too is, for example, I was running for vice chair in Weld County. I never even got an email about the meeting because I wasn't a voting member, so therefore I was being excluded. And if someone didn't tell me when that meeting was, I never would have known about it because everything's a secret. Like, I don't think there should be secrecy when it comes to these things. Like, what is your strategy, like, with your point number 2, and what do you want to do with all that moving forward?
No, I think you're bringing up a very valid point, and I would point out that it's not just the state chair that needs to have that understanding. Some of our larger counties can support media operations functionally equivalent to anything the chair, the state party could stand up. But if we can work them all cohesively and like in like that, because that's how the internet works. Is if you're connected and interconnected with other things, and they're liking what they're doing and they're bringing that together, that all generates additional critical mass. You can't just do it as this is the official page and we follow him and we follow. No, you've got to be interactive. You've got to be creating new content. You've got to be creating cohesive messaging through all of these channels.
Yes.
And that's, but I think that actually also then comes down to back around to the opt-out, because until we get our identity correct, it doesn't matter what the chair tries to impose, the body will naturally reject it.
Right.
And so what I tend to, I think probably, I would probably strategize more as a listener than I would a speaker, because I think the chairmanship job is to facilitate communication, to facilitate vision, and to facilitate initiative by the individual groups. That's the great strength of our U.S. military, which is, I'm sure you've probably studied extensively.
It's kind of what I do.
Yeah, but one of the key differences, discriminators between the U.S. military and pretty much every other fighting force on the planet, is that in the U.S. Army and in our military, initiative is actually inculcated not just at the top of the command chain and then travels down. It's like if the lieutenant goes down, the sergeant steps up. If the captain goes down, a lieutenant steps up. All the way down to lance corporal, and even privates are basically told, if you lose chain of command, it's your job to get your butt back to base.
That's what the E4 Mafia is for.
Yeah. And so, but I think that's one of the great strengths of Republicans, is that we are we are inculcated with that initiative. We don't just wait around for Daddy Soros to tell us where we're marching and what we're upset about today.
But they got 11,000 in Weld County, and it's effective, right? And I think we can, with this communication strategy.
Go up. How many of those were actually from Weld County?
Oh, probably like not even half of them. But I mean, that's the thing, though, is like I think we can strategize those things moving forward as well if you implement, what you're talking about. So you need to funnel everything to you and communicate through one channel of communication versus having like 7 different Facebook groups run by 4 people who run the entire state party, in the cobwebs of, the crypt keeper over here.
Well, I don't know if I would say you need one channel of communication. I would say you probably need a unified chain of command for dealing with this stuff. But we need multiple and interlocking and interconnected channels of communication.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So what's your third point as state chairman? You got number 1 and number 2. What's the third thing you want to implement as state chair if you get elected?
Well, I think all of that kind of leads to what is basically getting our eyes back on the prize of victory.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really the big thing is we've been losing for so long that we've become comfortable with it and we've expected to lose, and we need to get on offense, and that's a major shift in mindset. Like we can't just stand here and be the whipping boys for the Democrat Party. Like as I stated earlier on in this interview, we're an organization that has essentially been in a state of organizational co-op, and we've been compromised, and we're effectively an adjunct of the Democrat Party, being puppeted through the legislation passed by the state legislature, which is overwhelmingly Democrat.
Right.
And I think we have to, when you find yourself, in an ambush, what's the first step? To open fire back at them? No. The first step is to get your butt out of the kill zone.
Correct. And flank.
You got to get out and then reform and then counterattack. That's what we got to do.
Great. All right, Jeremy, I have some controversial questions for you because this is something that's been on my mind for the past couple of days, and I want your opinion on these things because I think that perfect. Just had to log in, people. Sorry, I lost that stream there real quick. We're back. I'll have to edit that out for the actual YouTube video. Anyway, so going on to, so the problem is that the people in CD3 and CD4 hacked into my computer and they cut me off because they don't want me to talk about these things. That's what they do.
Well, if it happens again, well, then
that's my theory.
Then we'll know.
Yeah. So, all right. So, what happened last week in CD3 is that, there's our national committee chairwoman, she was running votes off her personal computer. A lot of votes were lost. There's probably going to be a controversy filed that if you as state chair, you're going to have to handle that. There are Republicans such as Barb Kirkmeyer coming down and implementing themselves in Pueblo politics, even though they're not even members of that county. That's kind of weird, or that district, or that Senate district, or anything. What we saw in CD4 yesterday, which this breaks my heart a little bit because I know Lauren Boebert personally. I've been trying to get her to be one of the sponsors for the Dorito Act for the Air Force Academy for a few years now. And it's turned to she has ignored me, doesn't want to vouch for our veterans, doesn't want to vouch for the Air Force Academy. And she openly said yesterday that she was for opening the primary, which is a major shift in her positions as a grassroots candidate from CD3 in the past, right? So we're seeing politicians now who are quite popular on the national scale, shifting their alliances, shifting things to appease their donors, as we discussed before. You're gonna have to handle all these controversies, and you're gonna have to handle these people in these districts filing these things, and like I said, we can talk to them privately, we can bring a couple witnesses, we can kick them out of the party moving forward. These are probably the most contentious and important issues facing the state of Colorado today, is holding people accountable to the Republican values they claim to be running on. What do you want to do as state chair to fix those districts, such as 3 and 4 and 8 and 6 and 5 and 1 and 2 and whatever else? And what are you going to do to make sure that, not necessarily towing the line, I think that's a bad way of saying that, but ensuring that we are collectively being on the offense, as you said before, without these people interjecting controversial opinions into our party moving forward?
So I think the major thing that a chair can actually do, and I find it interesting that Colorado actually has 64 counties, and there are 64 spaces on a chessboard. I find that interesting, and
Yeah.
I believe that the chairman is basically functionally equivalent to the king piece on the chessboard, as far as the party is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, not that the king is the most important, and I'm not claiming monarchy status over a Republican organization, but what I'm saying is that the king is only important by virtue of the fact that if it is positioned wrong and if it has overstepped its boundaries, the game is functionally over.
Right.
And so I believe that the chair is required to exhibit restraint and to demonstrate that restraint. And so I think by being the example and leading by example, like in CD3, I would not be rushing down there to be like, I'm charging in to take care of it, because that's not going to help. It's only going to exacerbate the situation. But calming people down, talking through the issues, and getting ahead of these things with proactive leadership, I think is really the only course that actually has any chance of working. Now, if a chair or something like that wants to reject out of hand and rush forward with things, then collect the evidence, make the assemble the complaint and send it up to the state executive committee. They would be basically the avenue of first decision on that. But I think what we really have to do is take the small little actions that help build trust, because fundamentally trust has been broken, and we need to think through. I was talking with one of the guys here in El Paso County, and he basically tells me I'm an idiot because I won't accept computers to count ballots. And I asked him, well, since
we've
we've
seen
implemented
Jenna
it,
Griswold completely screw that up, so why would we want to do that?
Why would we want to do that? But also,
hello,
since we've implemented it, what's happened? Like, has it worked? Clearly, it's had unintended consequences and ramifications because it's completely circumvented our trust in our own selection process, which then leads to, it's just a cascade of these other problems. And it was funny because he was like, well, you just don't trust computers. I was like, dude, I'm talking to you while downloading stuff and using computers to communicate actively. What I don't trust is that you're taking our votes and giving us no ability to see them later, and you're basically creating an unauditable trail, and then you're telling me to just blindly trust the computer.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. You show me paper, you show me he's got paper, yeah, I'll accept whatever result comes out of that. But until you establish trust, and why you would want us to do that in a way that can be so easily compromised, now that leaves me questioning. And when you start creating doubt, you actually functionally remove doubt, because where there is doubt, there is no doubt. You don't trust. And we need to rebuild the trust, and that takes some hard conversations. That takes time, and that takes energy, and it's not a fun task by any means, but I believe it's a necessary task. Much like when we applied the discipline to Todd Watkins, I didn't relish that. I wish he had just said, "Oh, I guess the state party executive committee looked at it and they came and made a determination." But I think there's been a case of people projecting that their friend group, that their clique that they're with, has been in power and has been exclusionary and done and mistreated and held other people down. And so now they believe that if anybody else gets into power or gets elected and put into a position of authority, they're going to do the same thing. And I'm like, that's retaliation. Like, that's like, we have to move beyond that.
Yeah, and then
there's
you're
been
just
enough pride, bitterness, and character assassination on all sides.
Yeah,
I think we just have to find grace.
Well, it sounds to me,
others and for ourselves.
It sounds to me like your resolve in creating party unity and bringing more people into the party is simply just accountability to bad actors. And that's a simple way. If you get rid, just the tree may not be poisoned. It just might be the lowest hanging fruit that's causing the disruption. It doesn't mean the entire tree needs to be chopped down.
I think there's a berry bush. Don't pick the ones that are below dog knee height. That's those ones are going to be a little salty. You want to pick up a little bit waist height, like waist height or higher.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Well,
but,
okay.
That's the problem. Is the truism in corporate America is, shit rolls downhill.
So your solution for the Republican Party in Colorado is to stop peeing on the low hanging fruit.
Well, I think it would be appreciated by the low hanging fruit. I think they might say, "Hey, that's not sunshine."
That's great.
I think I had a thought there, but well,
it's fine.
It'll come back.
So Jeremy, I've really enjoyed this interview, and I think these long form conversations are super important in actually getting to know who the candidates are versus these 30-second to 1 minute clip gotcha things. I don't like them. That's why I really like long form interviews and getting to know people. I met you in the past. I hung out at your house at the watch party. Like, that was the first time I ever met you. Then the next time I ever saw you was the Colorado Hispanic Republicans Forum, and now I've really gotten to know you as a person. And if I was a voting member, I'd definitely be considering a vote for you for state chair. I think you're a moral and ethical person, and I think this is really important in our party moving forward. I don't think you're corruptible, which is an issue I see with a lot of other candidates who are self-interested. So sell yourself, Jeremy. Why should the SEC members vote for you on the 29th this week? Why should we elect you as a Colorado State Republican chairperson?
Well, I think it's been pretty obvious that I am the opt-out candidate. Like some of the other candidates have kind of said, "Oh, he's saying that in a way that makes a lot of sense," and they've kind of tacked closer to me. But I would say that you want to go with the guy that actually saw the problem from the beginning. I didn't just decide like, oh, I didn't see that people were talking about this, and then I need to figure out what my position is. The only reason I got into this race is because I saw that the other candidates were not talking about the opt-out. And in my opinion, that is the life or death issue for our party. If we don't opt out, we're choosing to stay in Democrat control. And at that point, we've lost our agency, we've lost our moral standing to complain, and we need to climb out of the cage that they've put us in. Now, what we're going to do after that, I believe, is up to the body. That's always been my deal as a CD5 chair. I'm not trying to twist the scales. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to hold an honest conversation within the body so the body can figure out what it wants to do. And then we move forward on that. But if you're looking for a chair that's going to, push your agenda and your friends and all that, no, that's your job as the members of this body. That's your job as the elected members as Republicans. And so if you want to, if you believe like me that God's not done with Colorado, then I'd appreciate your vote on March 29th. We're going to we have to stand, and we have to be brave enough to say what we want, not what we think we can get.
I love that. That was a really solid, strong ending, Jeremy. I just want to thank you so much for coming on this podcast and being vulnerable and actually having the time to discuss who you are as a candidate to everyone who's not able to meet you in person. And, for those of you, I'll be at the Steve Bannon event, but I got to go to work the next day. So I wish you the best of luck on the 29th. And thank you so much for coming and have this discussion with the people of Colorado today. It's really important.
Well, thanks for having me. And hopefully we'll have successful stuff to talk about on the 29th.
Yes, sir. I'm just hang on for a minute. Yep. And just hang on for me after this ends. All right.